Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is my game of the year, and like you saw in the title of the video, its story is the best I've ever experienced in all of the games I have played. I only recently got around to finishing it, and so I know I'm a little late to the party when making a video about it, but it's just one of those games that left me with so many thoughts that I just had to make a video to talk about them. And so that's what I'll be doing today. I want to look at a variety of topics that this game had that really stuck out to me, which lingered in my head for days after playing it. Now, this is the part of the video where I will warn you all of spoilers, but it's not really a warning. I am here to explicitly tell you that this video is only for those who have finished this game and want to see another person share their thoughts. If you have not had the chance to play it or finish it, then take this as a sign. Go do it. I don't care if you're not normally a fan of turn-based games, please go give it a try. I would much rather have this video tank if it means I can convince a few people to go and experience this masterpiece of a game. With that said, I know the story that this game has can be incredibly deep and confusing, and for me at least, I had to go research quite a bit in order to have all of my questions answered. So for the sake of you guys and your ability to all hopefully understand what I'm talking about, I will provide reminders about the story and lore that directly relates to the points I make or help explain the connections between characters. But I won't be walking you all back through every aspect of this story, as again, I expect you to have all hopefully played the game already. And on that note, I might also make a mistake when recalling these stories and making connections between characters. I'm basing my opinions here on my own experiences during my playthroughs and on all the information I was able to find online. Huge shout out to both Sunny Clef and Flex Deluxe on Reddit for their breakdown of some characters and their timelines of events, as it helped me understand the story better after I finished the game. Links will be in the description for any who want to check their posts out. Now, I'm not a huge fan of long intros, and so let's go ahead and dive into some of the aspects of this story that make it the best one I have experienced in gaming. Timestamps will be in the description if you want to preview the topics or skip ahead. The first topic I want to touch on is the role that Gustave had as a character in this game. From the very first scene, Gustave felt like the heart of Expedition 33, and his role as the main character of the game served multiple purposes when it comes to conveying this title's narrative. When we first start the game, we can already see that Gustave has had a past here in Lumiere with many connections to its residents and is well regarded by them. He has devoted much of his life to the betterment of the city, and now that he is 33 years old, he will be setting out on the next expedition in order to try to stop the Gommage once and for all. He is the brother of Emma, the chief counselor of Lumiere, and the guardian of Maelle. And on top of that, he is the one, with the help of Lune, who created the Lumina converter. For me, all of this was way more than enough to have me convinced that Gustave will be the main character of this story, and be the one who will lead this expedition as far as it can go. This game had already done such a good job at making me emotionally invested in this character and its world before I even left the docks of Lumiere. But now that we have left Lumiere and begun our expedition, this game has its first dramatic shift with the introduction of Renoir and the destruction of nearly the entire expedition. It is here where we, through the eyes of Gustave, see the true chaos and destruction that this world has to offer. After seeing all of this, he figures it is over and tries to end it all, only to be stopped by Lune, who for now is the only survivor, but for the player is also the first sign of hope. From here, the story continues as this team of two explores the continent, and we once again get to see the deep love and care that Gustave has for Maelle that keeps him going until they are reunited. This game has been constantly developing Gustave as a character and establishing how important he is not only to the expedition with his invention of the Lumina converter, but also through his many connections with the people we have met so far. We have a skill tree to unlock, and every night I wrote in his journal to his apprentices for when I thought I would inevitably return. All of this development and care that was put into making Gustave so likable and impactful only made his death more surprising to us all. When Gustave fell, it didn't feel scripted. It felt like the world had lost something irreplaceable, like I'd lost someone who was going to guide me through this journey. At this moment, he set into motion so many aspects of this game, and most importantly to me, started this battle of emotions that each plot twist had an impact on. To be honest, this is the hardest a character's death has ever hit me in a game, as I really grew to like Gustave in the time I was able to play as him, and it's been a while since a game has been able to pull this kind of raw emotion from me as a player. Keep in mind, Gustave's death takes place at the end of Act 1, and so in the grand scheme of things, I was not even that far into the game. Now, I started this section talking about how the role Gustave played was important, and what I mean by that is how his development, writing, and sudden death were all vital in helping this story convey its message and the emotional weight that it carries. So far, we know that everyone in Lumiere has lost people over the years, and this is what fueled them to go on all these expeditions and sacrifice their lives. This was made very clear to us as players from the start of the game. But as players, it will always be hard to understand their pain and feelings because of this fourth wall that is between us. And so, games try to make this separation as small as possible through emotional soundtracks and music that can help convey these emotions and get the player to feel how they want them to. This is just one example, and there are many others, but what I'm essentially saying is that Gustave and the role he played were in some ways a method of shrinking that separation between us players and understanding the pain and loss that the gommage causes, because now we have had someone that we grew attached to and was unjustly ripped away after making it appear like we would be playing as him the entire game. Maybe no one else saw it like this, but for me it really helped me understand more deeply why each and every person was on this expedition, because now I have also experienced a feeling of loss, and the way that this game was able to convey that to me was honestly perfect. Now I want to talk about the development of Maelle as a character. From the start, I knew she was going to play a big part in the story, as she was already standing out against the rest of the cast due to her age and desire to leave Lumiere much earlier than the year of her gommage. As the game progressed, the hints that she would play a big part in the story only became more apparent and were solidified for me when we saw Renoir and Maelle interact during Gustave's death. But there were still so many pieces missing, and I always had this feeling of once I learned one more thing about the story, it will all make sense. But that was not the case. There was a lot of new information shown between Gustave's death and the final reveal of who Maelle really is, and I never fully got the picture until the last possible second. That is one of the things I really appreciated about the story as a whole, as I'm sure you all know the feeling of when you're watching a movie or playing through a game, and then one plot twist happens and all of a sudden, you can guess how the rest of the entire story will play out. For me, Expedition 33 hit the perfect sweet spot where each new piece of information revealed surprised me, but also somehow fit into my previous assumptions about what would happen. I think this was a big part of why the story kept me so engaged and on the edge of my seat the entire playthrough. The way that the story was conveyed fits with the idea that I myself am going on an expedition, and each new detail is a surprising discovery or development in the story. I'm aware that this is an experience that I had with the game that may vary considerably based on the player, as every person's interpretation of the story is different from others, and some may just be better at connecting the dots than me. Though I do think it's safe to say that overall, this story was written in a way that aligns with these small discoveries, and does its best to prevent itself from becoming too predictable. Back to the development of Maelle, all of these cutscenes and hints all build up to the reveal that Maelle is much more than a curious 16-year-old girl. Rather, she is actually Alicia de Sandra, the youngest daughter of Renoir and Aline, the paintress. She was caught in the fire that took Verso's life as he saves her from its flames, but she still walked out with a scarred face and the inability to speak. This is when she was reborn as Maelle inside her brother's painting. All of this leads to her final motives, and these motives are what lead to one of two endings. I will talk about what all of her development led to and what her ending really means, but first I want to talk about the character who was responsible for the other ending, and how his introduction and development led to these two distinct viewpoints that we, the player, must choose between. When Verso was first introduced, I was not a fan, and from what I've seen, most of the community also held some bitter feelings to his sudden addition, as it seemed to me like the game threw him into our party as a replacement for Gustave, and also as our new main character less than 5 minutes after his death. So for a little while I was a bit salty playing as Verso, but again as the game progressed, more was revealed, and while it was clear that Verso plays a vital role on the story, what role that was came into focus. It turns out that this Verso is not the real one, as he died in the fire at the manor while saving Maelle. This Verso that we have in our party was painted by his mother, Aline, in order to help her cope with the loss of her son. This entire world that we are in is the real Verso's canvas and is filled with his creations such as Esque and Monaco. On that note, I also want to add that having these two characters as creations of Verso gives them an excuse for being fun comedic relief in this game. What I mean by that is most games like to throw in some characters or groups like the Gestrels that act as a fun sigh of relief in the more serious world and its story. Think of Morgana from Persona 5 or Tingle from the Zelda series. I think that the addition of these kinds of characters can be great, and it helps the more serious titles feel a little playful in parts, as a 40-hour game with nothing but tragedy and suffering might get a little negative. The problem I can have with these types of characters, however, is that they often seem forced and thrown into the title for just that purpose, and when looking at the lore more deeply in some of these games, the addition of these characters can seem half-assed in some ways. Expedition 33 and its more comedic characters like Monaco, Esque, and the Gestrels all don't suffer from this problem, as again, this entire world is Verso's canvas, and so the addition of these characters makes complete sense as they're just a result of Verso's creativity and desire to hang out with his best friend. This really is a small issue that I don't mind in most games, but I still thought it was cool how Expedition 33 dealt with it, and it helps make every aspect of the lore and story feel well thought out. Now I want to skip ahead to the very end of the game, where we have defeated the real Renoir and Maelle is finally able to convince him to leave the canvas, promising him that she will follow shortly after. However, Painted Verso realizes that Maelle is lying and that her intent is to live and die inside the painting, just like her mother Aline. This is when he decides to destroy the canvas himself, which is what sparks this confrontation between Maelle and Verso, leaving the fate of this painted world in the hands of the player. Let's start with Verso's ending, as it's the one I chose in my first playthrough. Originally, Verso's objective was to save his mother, regardless of what happened to his canvas. After the party defeated Aline the paintress, Verso thought that Alicia, also known as Maelle, would be able to come up with a new outcome where everyone, both inside and outside the canvas, could be saved, just like she had said in her letter. However, he then figured out that Maelle lied to Renoir about going back, and instead wished to die inside the painting, which would effectively repeat the same cycle of grief all over again. Verso was tired of being the center of all of these problems, which can be traced back to his death in the fire. He was tired of all the sacrifices that his loved ones kept making for him, and he just wanted to rest. And to do so, he needed himself, the painted Verso, to fade away alongside the rest of his painted world. This is what led to his decision to destroy the canvas and erase everyone inside. This action would help those in the real world accept Verso's death and move past their grief. Then there is Maelle's ending, where you choose to fight Verso as Maelle. Her sister, Clair, stated that both her and her mother's way of grieving were pretty much the same as they did so through Verso's canvas. However, while Aline is in this painting in order to grieve the loss of her son, Maelle is here not only to grieve the loss of her brother, but also to grieve for herself. The fire at the manor not only took her brother from her, but also left her scarred and unable to speak. This all leads to her decision to keep the canvas and bring back everyone who had lost their lives. But in return, this leads to her shifting the grief back to her family in the real world, essentially continuing the cycle again. And as a result of keeping the canvas, she also forces the painted Verso to continue living inside the painting and continue carrying the weight that his family's grief placed on him. In most people's eyes, there is a good ending and a bad ending, with most viewing Verso's ending as the good one. However, I think that most people would agree that both endings make sense, and I'm sure many people out there chose Maelle's ending because they truly thought what she did was right. The biggest pull of her side was that I would be able to see Gustave again, and the characters I've been traveling with, like Lune and Ciel, both sought to defeat the paintress and bring back their loved ones. From a completely logistical standpoint, Maelle's decision seems to bring more joy than the suffering it causes, as it ensures a happy future for Lumiere and the families it reunites, and only causes suffering for Verso and her family back in the real world, who will continue the cycle of grief. It also seemed odd to me that the reward this expedition receives for finally defeating the paintress after 67 years would be the end of their entire world. It seemed a little unjust and made the countless sacrifices seem like they were worth nothing. But you can also look at it as her causing suffering by subjecting this Verso to a life he does not want, but the action of not bringing back those who were lost does not inherently cause suffering as they've already passed. But Maelle actively choosing to subjugate Verso to this life he does not want and continue her family's cycle of grief is actively causing suffering. And so the decision instead changes to whose happiness matters more, those who are still alive in this painted canvas like Lune or Ciel, or the happiness of those outside in the real world. This is what I mean when I say that it's a complicated decision, and I fully understand why people chose both sides. For me, my decision came down to Verso himself, as in my eyes this entire world is his creation, and so to me it felt as if the decision of what to do with it should fall into his own hands, even if that means I could not see my favorite character, Gustave, return. I was still okay with that, as it means that Verso gets the closure he wants in the end. It also felt like it was more of a fitting end to the 40 or so hour journey I went through, as getting rid of this world that had caused so much pain and suffering felt right in a way. I love endings where there is no true, correct ending, and while many people may believe that there is one in this game, my personal experience and interpretation of the story made that decision much tougher than a simple right or wrong question. Both of the decisions you choose from left me with a feeling of guilt, because in the end, I'm hurting someone either way. Now, this may seem like a good place to wrap up the video, but I actually have one more big topic to talk about, and that is the villain in this story. This is yet another idea that was super interesting to me throughout my playthrough, as we seem to be fighting against many different people throughout the game, and each one seemed to have their own valid reasons for doing so, which ultimately made me question if there was a true villain in the end at all. We start the game with our eyes set on the Paintress, as we believe she is the one responsible for the gommage and the death that it brings. But, like I said earlier, we later learn that she's not the one responsible for the gommage, and instead the number she paints serves as a warning for the older creations, telling them that they will disappear. To be fair, we don't learn this information until very late in the game, but I at least got the feeling that there would be more to the story after my encounter with Renoir. When we first saw the Paintress in the opening scenes and art of the game, she always looked sad and tragic, and in some ways trapped. That assumption turned out to be right on the mark, and the only true thing she did wrong were her selfish actions in response to the grief she feels after the loss of her son. We are introduced to our second potential villain only shortly after the game starts, and while we just saw the Paintress supposedly kill all of the 34-year-olds, they at least seemed to go peacefully as they dissolved into rose petals. To me, there was a kind of quiet beauty to this event, and if any emotion was sparked, it would be sadness. On the other hand, when we first met Renoir, or the painted version of him, we see mass death again, but this time it's anything but peaceful. He effortlessly slaughters nearly the entire expedition without even hesitating. This made Renoir immediately the main threat in this game, and this event is what opened my eyes and made me realize that this story will definitely not be a simple one. Later on, as we continue to learn more about Renoir and the Desandra family, we learn that all of his actions are to protect his family, but the full extent of who his family really is and what this role represents were still details that were not shared. I just figured that he wants to protect his family and I want to protect Lumiere, and so that was reason enough for me to want to defeat him. Then we learn of those details and everything begins to shift my perspective of the antagonists in this game. I already did not hold much disdain for Renoir at this point, as again, I learned he had just been trying to protect his family, but I still was not a fan of him much as he did kill off my favorite character earlier in the game. But now, once all the facts have been laid out in front of me, I truly realized he is not an evil man, and if anything, he is the one morally correct, in my opinion. All of it comes down to each person's priorities, and in my eyes, Renoir had very logical reasons behind his actions, as he is a man who just loves and cares for his family, and prioritized their well-being over the fictional canvas world that Verso created. This then brings up the issue of what really matters, and what really makes someone alive, as it would not be fair to just claim all the creations inside Verso's paintings don't matter, because clearly they all have their own thoughts, experiences, and are at least close enough to being real that it fooled me until the big reveal. So once again, this game shows one of its many decisions that are not so easily placed into right or wrong categories, and it's definitely one of the things that this title excels at. That is one of my favorite decisions in this game. The developers made each character understandable, and no one is truly ever right or wrong. From what I've seen when researching this video, there are some pretty heavy debates in the Reddit threads I explored, and it only goes to show how each and every person is going to align themselves with different characters and motives based off their own values. In my eyes, a good story is one that pulls me into its world, and this game did just that. Right from the beginning, before we learned any of the wild twists, the base concept was still super interesting to me. Going on a journey to stop the paintress from painting death once again, with the sole purpose of for those who come after, is already a game I would have played start to finish. But they did not stop there. They revealed countless characters with their own lore and stories that all intertwine in different ways, and all of it seems incredibly thought out. This is one of those games that I feel like anyone will have a great time with the story just by playing it, but for those who really want to dive deeper and make connections, they will still be rewarded greatly for it. There were no clear gaps in the story or any weak aspects of it from what I can tell, and even with all that optional content you can explore and secrets to discover, there are still so many questions unanswered that make the discussions within the community super interesting, and leave the possibility of a sequel, though I'm not exactly sure how that would work. Maybe a prequel. Essentially what I'm saying is the narrative that this game had checked all of the boxes I had for a story-focused game, and then it went on to create new boxes, and then checked those. On top of all of that, the story is also accompanied by some amazing turn-based combat and an absolutely phenomenal soundtrack. I really hope that you all enjoyed listening to me talk about my favorite parts of the story and what makes it the best one I have experienced in any form of media. I'm also assuming that those of you watching have also hopefully completed the game and have your own thoughts on the experience. I have a great time reading through all of your comments, and so if you have anything to share, please do. I plan on continuing making videos on a variety of games that all center around my thoughts, opinions, and experiences playing them, and so if you're interested in that type of content, consider liking and subscribing. With that, thank you all for watching, and until next time.